So guys, welcome to the practical session now. So we have done enough theory so that now we can understand how to create a multi-node environment on a single Linux machine and how to configure L3 routes so that our multi-nodes can communicate with each other. So in this practical session, we will going to create a multi-node topology environment. We will going to create 3-node topology as shown below. So once you get familiar with the steps of how to create a topology on a single machine, you will be able to add or delete or change the configuration of the topology by yourself. So we will going to create 3-node topology, right? So for that, we will be using our VirtualBox software. So open your VirtualBox, right? Now, since you have only installed only one virtual machine right now, so in the left hand side, in the left pane, you will see only one virtual machine which is in the powered off state if you are not running your virtual machine. I have already installed the 3 virtual machines, so you can see virtual machine VM, VM1 and VM2, but in your case you will see only one virtual machine on the left pane. So you need to create 2 more virtual machines, that is VM1 and VM2 as per the topology diagram, right? Currently you are running only your main virtual machine, which is virtual machine VM. So in order to do so, first of all, make sure that your virtual machine VM is in powered off state, right? So bring your virtual machine to the powered off state, right? Now right click on this virtual machine and do clone. In the clone, you just give the name of the virtual machine which you want to create. In my case, I will give VM3 because VM1 and VM2 is already created, and reinitialize the MAC address of all network cards and just next. Just leave it as full clone and just leave it as current machine state, and it will take some time to create another virtual machine. So as you can see that the virtual machine VM3 has been created. In your case, your virtual machine must have been created. Remember that we need to create 2 virtual machines, that is 2 extra virtual machines, that is VM1 and VM2. So follow the same steps and create another virtual machine, that is VM2. So at this point of time, I am assuming that you are able to create virtual machine VM1 and VM2, and the virtual machine VM is already present. So at this point of time, we have our 3 routers ready. The next thing we need to do is to insert the connectivity or the links between our virtual machines. So we will take an example, that is, we will going to insert the link between virtual machine VM and VM1. Remember, the name of the link is VM-VM1, right? So let us see how to do that. So we need to insert a link between VM and VM1. So go to the virtual machine VM, make sure it is in powered off state, go to settings, go to network. Now here you can see that the Ethernet 2 interface of virtual machine VM is connected to Ethernet 2 interface of virtual machine VM1. So here you can see 4 adapters. These adapters are nothing but they simulate as an interface to your virtual machine. So adapter 1 corresponds to Ethernet 0, adapter 2 corresponds to Ethernet 1, adapter 3 corresponds to Ethernet 2, and adapter 4 corresponds to Ethernet 3. So in our topology diagram, we need to use the interface Ethernet 2. That means we will going to use adapter 3. So just check mark this adapter and choose here internal network and give the name of the link here, which is VM-VM1. go to advanced settings, just check this mark that is cable connected, and you need not touch any other settings on virtual machine VM, and press OK. So this configuration tells that you have inserted an interface Ethernet 2 on virtual machine VM, right? And you have given the name of the link which is connected to interface Ethernet 2 as VM-VM1. Now you have to do the same exercise on router VM1. So go to the router VM1, go to settings, go to network, and as per our topology diagram, we need to connect Ethernet 2 interface. So Ethernet 2 means adapter 3. Internal network, you have to supply the same name which you have given on virtual machine VM. So that is VM-VM1. Because you are giving the same name, it means the Ethernet 2 interface of VM1 will get connected to Ethernet 2 interface of VM because of same name. So in the advanced settings, just enable the cable connected, and you can see that the MAC address is assigned to this interface by your VirtualBox itself. So it is permanent, you need not configure it, and just press OK. So congratulations, you have just inserted a new link between the router VM1 and the router VM, right? So follow the exactly same steps to insert a new link between the router VM1 and the router VM2. And the name of the link to be used is VM1-VM2. So at this point of time, I am assuming that you are able to create all the 3 virtual machines and you are able to insert the links between the virtual machines, right? Now how to test whether the link insertion is successful or not? In order to test this, you restart all the 3 virtual machines in VirtualBox. So go to your VirtualBox and start all the virtual machines, that is virtual machine VM, VM1 and VM2. So we are going to start all the 3 virtual machines. You can go for a normal start, but I will go for a headless start, but you can go for a normal start so that you will get GUI to interact with your virtual machine. So guys, I am assuming that you have successfully started all your virtual machines. Now we will test whether the insertion of these links in our virtual machines has been successful or not. So we will check whether the interface Ethernet 2 actually exists on virtual machine VM or not. For that, just go to virtual machine VM. So I am on virtual machine VM here, and just type out the command ifconfig. Also note that I am working in a terminal. Once you go to your virtual machine, just press Ctrl Alt and T. It will launch a terminal for you. Inside that terminal, just trigger the command ifconfig. So I am on virtual machine VM, and you can see that the interface Ethernet 2 is present. So the interface Ethernet 2 has been inserted in our virtual machine VM. Similarly, go to virtual machine VM1, that is login into virtual machine VM1, and trigger the command ifconfig. So I am on virtual machine VM1, and it is showing me the interfaces Ethernet 3 and Ethernet 2. Ethernet 3 and Ethernet 2 has been successfully inserted in my virtual machine VM1. Similarly, you can check whether the interface Ethernet 3 has been successfully inserted in virtual machine VM2. So this is how. So if you are seeing that all these interfaces are listed in the output of ifconfig command, It means that our configuration that we have done in our VirtualBox has been successful. Now the next thing that we will going to do is to configure the IP addresses on these interfaces. You can see that each interfaces in this topology has an IP address. So next we will going to configure these IP addresses. For that, let us take an example that we will going to configure an IP address 192.168.4.2/24 on interface Ethernet 2 of virtual machine VM. So log in into your virtual machine VM and open the file sudo vim etc network interfaces. So this is the file that you need to open. When you open this file, you will get only auto allo and interface allo inet loopback. So these two lines will be there by default, and you will find nothing else in your file. Now next we need to configure the IP address 192.168.4.2/24 on interface Ethernet 2. In order to configure the IP address, you have to type out the following lines in this file. So auto Ethernet 2 is the name of the interface. iFace Ethernet 2 inet static address, and the IP address that you want to configure on interface Ethernet 2, which is 192.168.4.2. The network ID of this interface, that is 192.168.4.0, and the net mask of this interface, which is 255.255.255.0, and the broadcast address of this interface will be 192.168.4.255. Now we will study the broadcast in detail in the subsequent module. For now, just type out the following lines as it is in the file. After you have typed out the following lines, just save the file and come out. How to save the file? Press escape, then colon, and then W, then Q, and enter. You will be come out of the file, and the file will be saved with these changes. Right? So using this exercise, we have just configured the IP address 192.168.4.2 on interface Ethernet 2. Similarly, you have to do the same exercise on virtual machine VM1 and virtual machine VM2. Let us see the virtual machine VM1 file. So I am on virtual machine VM1 here, and you have to open the file with sudo privileges. Again, so your file will be empty, that is you will have only auto loopback as well as iFace loopback, inet loopback configuration only in your file, because you have to configure the IP addresses on interface Ethernet 3 and interface Ethernet 2. So the configuration that is relevant to you is this. So using the same format, just configure the IP addresses of this interface as follows. Right? So let us take an example that you want to configure the IP address 192.168.4.1/24 on interface Ethernet 2 of virtual machine VM1. So just specify here the command. So just specify here the interface Ethernet 2, specify the IP address you want to configure, specify the network ID, specify the mask value, and specify the broadcast address. And do the same exercise for interface Ethernet 3. And once you have done, just save the file and come out of the file. Come out of the editor. right? So do the same exercise on all the relevant interfaces which are shown in this topology, right? And after making the changes, just reboot your virtual machine. These changes will take effect when you reboot the virtual machine. So when your virtual machine comes up, to verify that the interfaces have been assigned the IP address, just trigger the command ifconfig, and you will see the IP address that you configured will appear for that particular interface here, right? Similarly, the broadcast address, the MAC address is provided by your VirtualBox, right? So using ifconfig command, you can verify on all the routers whether the IP address that is configured by you has taken effect or not. I am assuming that you have configured the IP addresses on all the interfaces of all the virtual machines, and using ifconfig command you have verified that the interfaces appear in the output of ifconfig command with the correct IP address configured on them. Now we will do a simple test whether everything is fine or not until this point. So go to your virtual machine VM. So I am on virtual machine VM, and let's try to ping the directly connected neighbor virtual machine VM1. So we're going to ping the IP address 192.168.4.1 from virtual machine VM. So let's ping. So I am pinging the directly connected neighbor. So you can see that you are receiving a reply. In your case, if you see the output such as this, it means our configuration has been successful. So remember, from virtual machine VM, you are trying to ping an IP address which falls in the local subnet of virtual machine VM. It means the IP address 192.168.4.1 is reachable via L2 routing only. There is no need of L3 routing. And that is the reason that without configuring any L3 routing information in virtual machine VM, you are still able to ping 192.168.4.1. For L2 routing, we need not configure anything. Similarly, log in into your virtual machine VM1 and try to ping the IP address 192.168.4.2 as well as IP address 192.168.1.2. Since both of these IP address falls in the local subnet of virtual machine VM1, from virtual machine VM1 you should be able to ping both of these IP addresses. So let's see. Now I am on virtual machine VM1. From VM1 I will try to ping an IP address 192.168.1.2. and I am able to ping, right? Similarly, I can also ping 192.168.4.2 and I am able to ping. So remember, I have not installed any L3 routes in any of these virtual machines, but still I am able to ping the neighboring virtual machines. Right? Without L3 routes, you can always ping the neighbor. But from virtual machine VM, if you try to ping the local subnet of virtual machine VM2, let us try. I am on virtual machine VM and I am trying to ping the IP address which is configured on an interface of virtual machine VM2. Now if I ping, you will see that this ping doesn't work. It means that the IP address 192.168.1.2 is not reachable from virtual machine VM. The reason is that the IP address 192.168.1.2 is present in a remote subnet 192.168.1.0/24, and our virtual machine VM doesn't know how to reach that remote subnet, right? So at this point of time, we can always ping the neighbor, but we cannot ping any IP address which is more than one hop away from our current virtual machine, right? So from VM2 you cannot ping 192.168.4.2, and from VM you cannot ping 192.168.1.2. So are you following? So next thing that we will going to do is to install the L3 routes, so that virtual machine VM can now ping the IP address of virtual machine VM2, and VM2 can ping the IP address of virtual machine VM. So next we will going to install the L3 routes. So in order to install the L3 routes, just open the same file. So I am on virtual machine VM, and you have to add this line as it is in your virtual machine VM, that is uproute add -net 192.168.1.0 net mask, the mask value, the gateway IP address, and the next hop IP address, and the outgoing interface. And just save the file and come out of the editor. And of course, reboot the virtual machine. So once you have rebooted this virtual machine, now if you try to ping 192.168.1.2, it will still not work. The reason is that you can reach from VM to VM2, but VM2 still doesn't know how to reach the local subnet of virtual machine VM. That is, so far we have set up the communication in one direction only, right? So in order to set up the bidirectional communication, we need to teach the virtual machine VM2 to how to reach the virtual machine VM. For that, you have to configure this route in the virtual machine VM2. So just copy paste this line in etc/network/interfaces file, and just save the file, come out of the editor, and just reboot the virtual machine VM2. Now I am assuming that you have done this step. Now log in into virtual machine VM and try to ping 192.168.1.2.